Xavier Thomas, he demoralized Eric Dungy in the Syracuse game, just killed him, right, in that tackle. One that ESPN even wrote up an entire article about how awesome that tackle was. So Thomas is less of a unknown. I think a lot of people are going to be waiting for him. I think he's going to be that guy that an hour before the show starts, 30 minutes before the show starts, you're going to hear them talk about Thomas over and over and over about how he's just going to take over. So he's really a guy that we all expect to shine, but I still wanted to talk about him a little bit because he's taking over a just legendary defensive line. And Travis Etienne recently said he doesn't hear as much smack talk anymore because you had four guys that were so, I mean, they went to movies together. They played video games together. They dressed up in Power Rangers together. They waited so that Dexter Lawrence could graduate and draft together. Which is, I mean, brotherhood, true and true, right? So it's going to be some big shoes to fill on that defensive line. Thomas, I know, is ready, and he's already shown that. I mean, he's a freshman All-American, and he was like behind a first-round draft pick. How many people do you know become freshman All-American behind a first-round draft pick? You normally don't get a lot of snaps in front of or behind a first-round draft pick, and he got enough. And during his short amount of snaps, he was an All-American, which is crazy to say. And I just look for him to just dominate even more. And I just keep replaying that series. When I was doing the notes for this segment, I would just keep replaying that Syracuse sack because it wasn't just an awesome let-free sack, but it was like 2 hours of anxiety for Clemson fans just released in that one plant on the ground of Dungy. So it was definitely one that was something that catapulted them to continue to just be the best team ever and be undefeated. I don't know if if they're gonna gel like those four guys that we had. I think it's harder to gel than it is to just have one stud. I know for many, Clemson's has always had a stud on the defensive line. It seems like since I was born, basically. There's always been some rotation of some good guys, some really good guys, good players on the defensive line. So I'm not surprised that Thomas is another star in the line of stars, but I'm not concerned, but I'm curious to see how the new guys mesh, the Fosters, the Pickneys, the Williams, the Henrys, the Tyler Davis. I just wonder how they're all going to mesh together and form that brotherhood. Is there going to be a Power Rangers 2.0? I don't know. Are they going to go trick-or-treating together? I don't know. Are they going to just destroy backfields? I think they will. But it's definitely an interesting moment because right now, that defensive line, for the most part, is guys that you don't really see, other than Thomas, you don't really see on the poster.
Yeah, let's get this going, right? X right here. I mean, that's what we're going to be doing in Death Valley a lot next season because he's going to make a big difference. Okay, so Don Munson, of course, voice of the Clemson Tigers, this is what he said to me when he was on the ring last week. He said that he feels that Xavier Thomas has an excellent chance of becoming the greatest defensive lineman ever to be at Clemson. Let's let that sink in for a minute. That's incredible upside that they're already seeing in Xavier Thomas as just a freshman. Reminds me so much of Vic Beasley, his speed, his athleticism, but the size that he has as well. He's not just getting around the end and getting sacks. He's pushing guys out of the way and could be a big difference maker in the run game as well. Let's not sell him short right there. He had some big stops in the run game last year when he was playing also. I think the sky is the limit for Xavier Thomas. And I think when we're thinking about Clemson's defensive line going from last year to this year, it's going to be very unfair to make a comparison, right? Because you've got all those veterans. You do have some veteran presence here, but a lot of young guys. Brent Venables has replaced some fantastic defensive linemen at Clemson a number of times. I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be able to do that again this season. And when I hear someone like Don say the upside on Xavier Thomas is that big, I'm a big-time believer in that. And also, let's remember, Isaiah Simmons has just been named USA Today best linebacker in the country. Maybe the best athlete on the field on a defense in America is Isaiah Simmons. I think he's going to be a terror this year. So Clemson's going to get their sacks. They're going to get their tackles for loss. They lead or number 2 in the country every season in tackles for loss. I don't think that's going to change. It just might not be the usual way that they get there this year. And you might see a guy like Isaiah Simmons get more. And you might see some backup guys on the defensive line getting more of those tackles for loss instead of really being the rock stars on the defensive line. I could not possibly be more excited about what Brent is dialing up for this season, and especially some tests in those early games, right? You've got a Georgia Tech team that I don't think is necessarily going to be strong. You don't have any tape on these guys, right? They were the triple option Paul Johnson mess for so long. You have no idea what they're bringing in week one. I guarantee you, as soon as Texas A&M season ended last year, the Jimbo Fisher started sitting in a room with a whiteboard and trying to dial up stuff for Clemson in week two, right? And then you go up to the nemesis of the last two seasons, Syracuse, and their high-octane offense that's always bringing craziness, right? You got three teams laying in wait for Clemson from an offensive perspective. It's going to be an immediate test for these young guys. And I look at Xavier Thomas as a guy that needs to be a leader on this defense, along with Isaiah Simmons, Tanner Muse back in the secondary as well, and Kayvon Wallace, let's not forget about him, and lift these guys up early. I think some of the strictest tests on the defensive side are going to come early. If Clemson makes it through that without a scratch, which I think they will, watch out. That defense is going to get really good by the time it's playoff time again next year.
Well, you got some great points there. I will tell you, though, I mean, I did watch the Georgia Tech spring game. It's available on YouTube. What was interesting to me is just how similar it was to more of a Chad Morris type offense, or even what Clemson does, which I feel like is not going to really go well for when they play against Clemson, because what does Brent Venables practice against all day?
Yeah.
He practices against Clemson type plays. I'm sure when they are ready to play against Georgia Tech, they're going to adjust a little bit. But I looked at, you had split backs, one on each side of the quarterback, typical shotgun spread. Slot guy goes across the middle, got one guy going deep, got one guy maybe going post. One thing I will say is it's kind of basic, at least in the spring game. You have your one receiver that they look at, that the quarterbacks seem to look at, and then the check down guy. It was never the third or fourth guy like Trevor can do. Even as a true freshman, Trevor could do that just walking into the stadium. But I think that also doesn't go well for Georgia Tech, because Clemson is the secondary for sure is going to be ready for somebody who just looks at two different receivers every play. But I think Georgia Tech is definitely very similar to Clemson, and I think that's a good thing for Clemson because they're used to it, and it's not wasting their time against some gimmicky triple option that nobody uses except for the military schools. And I love them, I'm an Army guy, but I just hate having to prepare for the triple option, knowing that it's just for one game. You have to do so much preparation for just one game and worry about the cut blocks. You don't have to worry about any of that anymore. So I think it's more of a traditional spread option, or spread, shotgun kind of style. And so I'm excited to see that. I think that's a good thing for those defensive guys, like you said, that are kind of going to be leaning on those veterans, but those guys that we don't know their names very well yet. I think it's going to be good to get them ready. And it's a Thursday night game, so they have time to prepare for that Texas A&M game. And like you said, Texas A&M doesn't have that extra 2 days or so, but they also don't have a ton of film on the new defensive line, and you have to trust Brent Venables. I mean, it's been how many years? Not 8 years of 10-win seasons. You can't not trust Dabo or Brent or Elliott or Jeff. You just you just have to let them do their thing and just understand that they're great at developing these players from, like you said, Vic Beasley type guy. I mean, he wasn't a big 5-star guy. Came in, they developed him up. These guys that are taking these guys' place, like KJ Henry was a 5-star guy on Rivals. Pickney, Williams, 4-star guys. Foster, 4-star, I think. So you got a defensive line, even though they're not as well known to maybe the fans or maybe ESPN, but they're definitely some legitimate guys. And so I'm excited to see Lynn J. Dixon, as we talked about earlier, and I'm excited to see that entire defensive line head up by leading the way by Xavier Thomas as well. Big X, like you said. I can't wait to do that. See 80,000 fans hold up an X sign when we just nail a quarterback. That'll be some exciting thing, especially that Carolina quarterback. It'd be nice to just throw up an X